Good morning, everybody. I'm Kate Seeley, Vice President of the Middle East Institute. Thank you all so much for joining us today. This is our first event since the resignation of President Hosni Mubarak. So it's a historic occasion for us and, of course, an historic occasion in the Arab world. And I'm so glad that we can mark this occasion with a very interesting and timely event today. It's especially fitting that we're hosting two academics who have spent much of their career listening to the views and opinions of Egyptians and Arabs. Opinions which, frankly, have not been of much interest to the U.S. government or the U.S. media for quite some years. I think the last time we were interested in what the Arab world really thought was in 1919, when President Woodrow Wilson sent the King Crane Commission out to the Arab world to poll Arab views and find out what kind of governance they wanted for the future. Most said they wanted self-determination, and if they couldn't have self-determination, they would settle for an American mandate. However, they got French and British mandates, and arguably that is the source of some of the problems emerging today. So Americans have a lot of catching up to do on Arabs and the multiplicity of Arab voices out there. And as we saw in Tahrir Square, there really is a diversity of opinion. We saw young and old, middle class and working class, Islamists and secularists, and people with views in between demanding change and reform. So it is our great fortune to have with us today Stephen Kull and Shibley Telhami, who've been polling in Egypt and the Arab world for decades and who've compiled a fascinating collection of data on Egyptian views of governance, democracy, Islam, the Arab-Israeli conflict. And all of that data is going to be very important in trying to understand what we should be looking for in the coming months as Egypt hopefully transitions toward democracy. Stephen Kull is a member of the faculty of the School of Public Policy at the University of Maryland and director of the Center on Policy Attitudes. He's worked extensively with U.S. congressional staffers, State Department officials, and UN officials to develop surveys that help policymakers gain greater insight into Arab values and beliefs. He has a book entitled Feeling Betrayed, The Roots of Muslim Anger at America, which will be published next month by Brookings. Shibley Telhami is a very familiar face here in Washington. He is the Anwar Sadat Professor for Peace and Development at the University of Maryland and is a non-resident fellow at the Saban Center of the Brookings Institution. He's an expert on U.S. policy in the Middle East, particularly on the role of the news media in shaping political identity and public opinion in the region. He's conducted public opinion polls in Egypt and elsewhere in the Arab world for over a decade. His best-selling book, The Stakes, America and the Middle East, was selected by Foreign Affairs as one of the top 5 books on the Middle East in 2003. So welcome to you both. It's a great privilege to have you here and our good fortune. Before we begin, though, I just want to plug a few events that are coming up. We're doing an awful lot of programming during this very unique time. Tomorrow we have an event called Covering Egypt, Covering Islam, What the Media Get Wrong and Occasionally Right, with former BBC correspondent Roger Hardy and Barbara Slavin, formerly of the Washington Times. That is going to be very interesting. And then on Friday, we have an event called Inside the Egyptian Military with one of our own scholars, Dr. Graham Bannerman, and Colonel Joseph Engelhardt, who was the former U.S. Defense Attaché in Cairo. So we'll get a real look at what to expect as the Egyptian military takes over and oversees this transition to democracy. And then next week, Wednesday, February 23rd, we are hosting Congressman Robert Wexler, former Congressman Wexler, and the former advisor to Yitzhak Rabin, Yoram Perry, who will be talking about the opportunities for Palestinian-Israeli peace in this new climate. So I hope you can join us for these events. And it's at times like this that MEI's strengths are revealed. We have 45 volunteer scholars who've been doing an amazing job reaching out to the media and talking about the Arab world from their perspective, mainly as former diplomats and ambassadors who now that they're outside of government, are very free to say what they think and believe about the future of the Arab world. Our scholars have done hundreds and hundreds of interviews. They've been writing op-eds. And it's at times like this that we really need your support. So I hope you will consider becoming an MEI member if you aren't already. You can pick up one of our flyers downstairs or go online. And for $100, join MEI. You get our wonderful Middle East Journal, one of the finest academic journals on the Middle East out there, as well as access to our events and activities, and the honor of being a member of a very unique nonpartisan organization. So please do consider joining. Now we're going to begin. We're going to start with Mr. Kull, who will speak for 15 to 20 minutes, and then Shibley, and then we'll take questions. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Well, as we all know, in Egypt, with the Mubarak government gone, there is a process now underway of forming a new government, and numerous forces are gearing up for this process, for this conflict. And the U.S. is surely going to play some role in this process, and as it does, it really needs to have a plan for dealing with the various forces operating in Egyptian society. So a key question is, what is occurring in the Egyptian public? On Tahrir Square, we heard many Egyptians expressing liberal ideas that sound even Jeffersonian. But we also know that the Muslim Brotherhood is a highly organized force in Egyptian society and essentially waiting in the wings to play an important role. And they did, candidates associated with them did fairly well in the last election. So, what do the Egyptian people actually feel about all of these key issues related to governance, democracy, the role of Islam, and so on? Over the last, 5 years or so, I've been involved with a project that has been conducting polls and surveys in Egypt. Some of these have been nationwide polls. Some of them have been focused on the major cities. I've also conducted focus groups on numerous occasions, and that has been very helpful in gaining some insight and in shaping the questions. So I'm going to sort of spin through a number of findings. I have a fair amount to cover, so I'll probably be moving somewhat quickly. So first, what we do find is that there is remarkably high levels of support for liberal values throughout the Egyptian public. As thinking about a democratic political system as a way of governing this country, do you think democracy is good or bad? And 83% say that democracy is a good way of governing this country. This is one that was done by World Values Survey, actually. Democracy may have problems, but it's better than any other form of government. Agree, disagree, and an overwhelming 91% agree that democracy is better than any other form of government. We presented this principle that's in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The will of the people should be the basis of the authority of government. And we were pretty interested in seeing how people would respond to this, because in some way it goes up against the idea that Islamic law should be the basis of the authority of government. And nonetheless, 98% agreed with this principle, that the will of the people should be the basis of the authority of government.